need those. Good morning. That's just a real deep conviction that for some here today, you didn't come of your own accord. God brought you. For some, well, for all, yes, I get that. But then there's that layer of pursuing. I love what God does. I love how he pursues. There's this story, but it's not this morning's message, but there's this story about the lost sheep. And the shepherd's got 100 of them. The 99 are all fine, but one's gone missing. What does the shepherd do? He leaves the 99 and goes after the one. Because God's always going after the ones. Always. So that's a little sidebar. That's the right, pleasure. Have we started already? So we've just had a 3-week series. If this is your first week with us, we've just finished a 3-week series, which I've decided we haven't finished. That Lance knows you're okay. This isn't like a curveball. And what we were doing, we were looking at a timeline of Jesus' life to the crucifixion. Okay, to Easter this last weekend, yes? Remember eating chocolate? Yes? Okay, so, it's not really about that, but that might help trigger where we've been the last few weeks. So 3 weeks ago, we looked at 2 weeks before Jesus' death. And what was going on then? There was this a couple of amazing things happened. Lazarus, his best mate, he raised him from the dead. No small thing. And then a few days later, they threw a party for Jesus. And there's a whole load of people there because everyone had got news. You know, they didn't have TikTok back then. They just got news out and people were like, wow, Lazarus is alive. You must be joking. No, he's alive. He's going to be at the party in a few days. So people came along to see, and Mary went to the feet of Jesus and broke this really, 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 really expensive bottle of perfume all over his feet and prepared him for what was coming, his burial. That following weekend, of course, was Palm Sunday, which Lance brought to you that week. And then last weekend, of course, you have Good Friday, Easter Saturday. I love Easter Saturday. And I think I love it because in our lives, we're often in between. We're often in between death and resurrection, yes? That land in between, there's something about the Saturday, the silence of the Saturday, that's important in our lives. And then we got to resurrection last Sunday. But then what? So I thought I'd continue the timeline. Well, kind of. I'm going to go to the same day. Because there was other things that went on Resurrection Sunday, other than the most important thing that's ever happened. Jesus rising from the dead. There was other stuff going on that day, which we'll get to in a minute. But I felt led just to remind us. This is this really powerful hymn in Paul's book to the church in Philippians. In Philippi, actually. They were the Philippians. And he says this, that Jesus became obedient even to the point of death, even death on a cross. Then what? God highly exalted him and gave him the name that's above every name. That's what happened. He gave him the name that's above every name, that at his name, every knee. So it's not going to be optional. One day it won't be optional. Every knee will bow. Those in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. That's what happened next. Jesus rises from the dead, and the Bible clearly shows us that Jesus stayed around for about 40 days, revealing himself to people. The other fun thing that was happening, which you might not know, and again, I'm digressing, but I think it's amazing. If you look at the end of Matthew's Gospel, when Jesus died and rose again, those that believed that had died, they rose. They were walking around the city. It says it clearly. They were walking around. Can you imagine that? You're walking around Jerusalem a few days after. You're just walking around. Didn't I go to your funeral last week? Amazing. We're going to stay on Resurrection Sunday because something happened later that day, and I think I've got too much to say in 1 week, so I'm actually with you again a week on Sunday, so I think I'm going to spread this over 2 weeks just to give us some room to breathe together. But let me ask you a question as we begin. Have you ever felt like life has just ripped the carpet from underneath you? Which everything seems to be going swimmingly well, and then all of a sudden someone comes along and just takes that carpet that you're standing on and rips it out, and you're like, whoa, what happened? That happened to us. It's happened a number of times to us. Strangely. What is it with us and carpets? It happened to us in 2005. We'd been walking in ministry with a couple in the church we were in at the time for 17 years. All kinds of wonderful things had happened in the house. It was a beautiful time. Really beautiful time, and lots of fruit, lots of wonderful things happening. Songs being written, songs going to the ends of the earth, touring happening, all kinds of wonderful things were going on. I thought, this can't get much better than this, can it? And then the carpet was ripped from under us as our friends, our ministry friends, were taken out of the game very quickly and suddenly, and all of a sudden, the landscape changed. Do you ever find, or is it this just that happens to me, that you're in a very natural, normal moment in life and it reminds you of what you're walking? Later that year, I was in Dallas, Texas, for the first time, and we were at this house for a barbecue, and I'd not been to this house before, and just chatting to people, having a good time. We were struggling in life really because of all that had been going on at home, and I wasn't there with my family, and then my wife called me. Maxine called, and I'm on the phone, and I could tell that this was going to be not an easy phone call. You know those type, no, not the type where I'm in trouble, not that type of phone call. I also know what that sounds like. But no, it wasn't that type. This was going to be, oh no, this is difficult, and I'm in a room full of people. I've got to get out of here. So I'm on the phone, and I walked out the back of the house, and I'm walking around outside in this, trying to be as intent and present as I could be in this phone call with my wife. And I saw like a black surface over to my left-hand side. So I walk onto the black surface, and it's a swimming pool cover. I am not exaggerating. I was knee-deep in water on the phone, dropped the phone, and all I'm thinking about is survival. I mean, really. I was like, so I'm scrambling to get off the swing. You would think you would just turn around and take the steps that you'd just taken. Oh no, I walked right across that thing. It was like Jesus walking on water, only a really bad version of that. It wasn't really. But in the natural, I was disorientated. I was like, what is going on? I was like, what was that? Like, I didn't know there was a swimming pool outside. Managed to get to the other side. But in a very natural way, it reminded me of what life does. You're walking along, and all of a sudden, you're not. It just gets ripped out from underneath you. There was a couple of followers of Jesus on Resurrection Sunday who evidently didn't get the news. Well, they got a bit of news, but they thought, nah, that can't be possible, surely. Luke chapter 24, verse 13. And this is where we're going to camp for the next couple of weeks that I'm with you. That very day, Resurrection Sunday, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. He said to them, "What's this conversation that you're holding with each other as you walk?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, named Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" Like, really? And he said to them, "What things?" They said to him, "Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, a man who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers delivered him up to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we'd hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it's now the third day since these things happened, and some women of our company amazed us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they didn't find his body, they came back saying that they'd seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they didn't see." And he said to them, "Oh, foolish ones and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So they drew near to the village to which they were going, and he acted as if he was going farther. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Oh, stay with us, for it's towards evening and the day is now far spent." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took the bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them, and their eyes were opened. They recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. Can you imagine? They said to each other, "Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked to us on the road? While he opened to us the scriptures?" And they rose that same hour and returned to Jerusalem. They found the 11 and those who were with them gathered together, saying, "The Lord has risen indeed. He's appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he was known to them in the breaking of bread. The road to Emmaus and back. Henri Nouwen describes it like this. Two people are walking together. You can see from the way they walk that they're not happy. Their bodies are bent over, their faces are downcast, their movements are slow. They do not look at each other. Once in a while they utter a word, but their words are not directed to each other. They vanish in the air as useless sounds. Although they follow the path on which they walk, they seem to have no goal. They return to their home, but their home is no longer home. They simply have no other place to go. Home has become emptiness, disillusionment, despair. They can hardly imagine that it was only a few years ago when they had met someone who had changed their lives. Someone who had radically interrupted their daily routines and had brought a new vitality to every part of their existence. They'd left their village, followed that stranger and his friends, and discovered a whole new reality hidden behind the veil of their ordinary activities. A reality in which forgiveness, healing, and love were no longer mere words, but powers touching the very core of their humanity. The stranger from Nazareth had made everything new. He'd made them into people for whom the world was no longer a burden but a challenge. No longer a field of snares but a place with endless opportunities. He had brought joy and peace to their daily experience. He had made their life into a dance. But now he's dead. His body that had radiated light had been destroyed under the hands of his torturers. His limbs had been ploughed by the instruments of violence and hatred. His eyes had become empty holes. His hands had lost their grip, his feet their firmness. He had become a nobody among nobodies. All had come to nothing. They had lost him. Not just him, but with him, they lost themselves. The energy that had filled their days and nights had left them completely. They had become two lost human beings, walking home without having home, returning to what had become a dark memory. There's five things in this story that I want to bring out over these couple of weeks. 5 things that this story speaks of to me. Speaks of loss and of presence, of invitation, of communion, of mission. Together, I think these aspects form a movement. It's like a movement from resentment to gratitude. If you like, from a hardened heart to a grateful one. Loss. Mourning our losses. I realise today as I step into this particular aspect that for a lot of us in the room, we've experienced loss. But in many regards, we all have. There's lots that we lose along the way. How do we mourn our losses? What do we do with our losses? That's the first question I think that faces us. It was facing them. They were just going home. The 2 followers of Jesus, they thought it was all nonsense. We're going home. So they took a long 7-mile journey home. What do we do with our losses? Do we hide them? Are we going to live as if they're not real? Mask. Are we going to keep them away from our fellow travellers on the path? Are we going to try and convince ourselves that our losses are little compared with our gains? Are we going to blame someone? We do all of these most of the time, but there's another possibility. The possibility is to mourn. Mourn our losses. We can't talk or act them away. We can shed tears over them and allow ourselves to grieve deeply. I've had a number of very significant losses in my own life. 2 friends that died very suddenly in their 30s, one from breast cancer, one from a brain aneurysm. And then a few years ago, of course, as many of you know, my father passed away at the age of 81. And I remember reading during that season of grieving and mourning, I remember I was reading from somebody, I can't remember who it was, but they said this phrase: if you have 100 tears to cry, don't cry 50 of them. To grieve is to allow our losses to tear apart feelings of security and safety and lead us to the painful truth of our brokenness. Our grief makes us experience the abyss of our own life, in which nothing's settled actually, but everything is constantly shifting and changing. It's the fragility of life. Our grief reminds us that every day is a gift. Now, little caveat. Paul says to the church in Thessalonians in chapter 4, we grieve, but we don't grieve as those who are without hope. And that's so key. Because what we'll often do is we'll avoid grief and we'll try to avoid or deny the suffering of the loss because we think, oh no, I can't go there. But no, it's okay, because you have hope. We have hope. Our hope's eternal. These 2 travellers on the road from Emmaus, these 2 followers of Jesus who thought he'd gone, they thought their whole life had ended in that moment. What were they going to do? They had no idea. Totally despondent. What does Jesus do? Walks up alongside them. Why? Because of the resurrection. In fact, Jesus said, didn't he, in his very first message, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. It's important to mourn. Those who mourn are those who are blessed, not the ones who do the comforting. No, the ones who do the mourning. That's the unexpected news. There's a blessing that's hidden in our grief. Somehow in the midst of our tears, a gift is hidden. Somehow in the midst of our mourning, the first steps of the dance actually take place. Somehow the cries that well up from our losses belong to our songs of gratitude that we've lifted up this morning. That's how the journey starts. And the question really becomes whether our losses lead to resentment or gratitude. The tears of our grief can soften our hardened hearts and open us up to the possibility of saying thank you. Living life as a gift for which we're grateful. In fact, you may have found, like me, that the beauty and preciousness of life is intimately linked with its fragility and mortality. It just is. And actually, for each one of us, that begins with a cry for mercy in those times. It's a cry for mercy that comes from a contrite heart. That's in contrast to a hardened heart. A contrite heart is a heart that does not blame, but acknowledges its own part in the sinfulness of our world and is ready to receive God's mercy. Isn't a true confession of sin debilitating? Well, yes. But no sin can be faced without some knowledge of grace. No loss can be mourned without this intuition that we'll find new life. And we'll smile again. We're sinners, yes, hopeless sinners. Everything is lost and nothing is left of our hopes and dreams like those two followers. But there's a voice that says, my grace is enough for you. And we cry again for the healing of our hearts. And in the midst of our mourning, we find a gift to be grateful for. Mourning our losses on this road is an important aspect of the path of life. The second thing, discerning the presence of God. Let me take you back to verse 17. He said to them, like he didn't know what they were talking about, right? He said to them, what is this conversation that you're holding with each other as you walk? They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, named Cleopas, answered him, are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days? And he pushed him further. What things? They said, concerning Jesus of Nazareth, a man who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people. The chief priests and rulers delivered him up to condemn him to death and crucify him. We'd hoped that he was the one. You can hear their despair. We'd hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yeah, and besides all that, it's now the third day since this all happened, and some women of our company have amazed us. They were at the tomb early this morning and they didn't find his body. And they came back saying that they'd seen a vision of angels who had said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said, but they didn't see him. And he said to them, O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. Here's how that played out. Jesus listened to them. Now they were listening to him. As he talked to them, they said a bit later, didn't they? Oh, don't our hearts burning? As he talked to them, they gradually came to know that their lives weren't as little as they thought they were. But they were part of a great mystery, just like you and me, that not only embraced many generations, but stretched itself out from eternity to eternity. Notice the stranger, because they didn't recognize him, yes? The stranger didn't say there was no reason for sadness, but that their sadness was part of a larger sadness in which joy was hidden. The stranger didn't say that the death they were mourning wasn't real. He didn't go, surprise! It's me! No. He validated the mourning. The stranger didn't say that the death they were mourning wasn't real, but it was a death that inaugurated even more life. Real life. The psalmist describes our lives as a mere breath. Life is short. We cannot simply expect that the little that we see, hear, and experience will reveal to us the whole of our existence. We're too nearsighted and too hard of hearing for that. Someone, a strange someone, has to open our eyes and ears and help us to discover what lies beyond our own perception. Someone has to make our hearts burn. And like the travellers on the road to Emmaus, Jesus joins us as we walk in sadness and explains the scriptures to us. But sometimes we don't know it's him. We think of him as a stranger who knows less than we do about what's going on in our lives. And still, yet we know something. We're like, we sense something because our hearts burn. Our hearts burn within us. And later, when it's all over, whatever it might be, we might be able to say, didn't our hearts burn within us as he talked to us on the road and explained the scriptures to us? But when he walks with us, sometimes it's a little too close for comfort. Yeah? Okay, good. That's a few. Each day there are words to accompany us. We cannot live without words that come from God. Words to pull us out of our sadness and lift us up to a place from where we can discover that we are truly living. It's important to know that although these words that are read or spoken are there to inform us, to instruct us, to inspire us, their first significance, and we've talked about this before, is that these words make Jesus present to us on our journey, on your path as you walk out those doors in a bit. On mine. These words make Jesus present to us. You see, with his words, he did much more than just simply make them think of him, or instruct them about himself, or inspire them with his memory. Through his words, he became really present to them. You know, in the book of Genesis, we're told that God created the world. In Hebrew, the words for speaking and creating, they're the same word. They're not two different words. One word, same word for speaking and creating. So the literal translation, for instance, would be, God spoke light and light was. Because for God, speaking is creating. So, if you take that thought all the way, God's word then must be full of God's presence. He's fully present in his word. So on the road to Emmaus, Jesus became present through his word, and it was that presence that transformed sadness to joy and mourning to dancing. This is what happens when we remember the death and resurrection of Jesus, like we have over the last few weeks. The word that is read and spoken wants to lead us into God's presence and transform our hearts and minds. As Jesus said, let him who has ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit is saying. The word of God is not just a word to apply in our daily lives at some later date. It's a word to heal us through now, today, in this moment, in our listening here and now. And we need the words spoken and explained to us by the one who joins us on our path, on our crossroad. A presence first discerned in our burning hearts. It's this presence that encourages us to let go of our hardened heart and become grateful. And finally, I love this tiny little bit of this story. Inviting the stranger. Verse 28 and 29. So they're having this conversation. They've been walking 7 miles. They drew near to the village to which they were going. He acted as if he was going further. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, for it's towards evening, and the day is now far spent." So he went in to stay with them. Jesus acted as though he was going further. Jesus isn't going to force himself into your life. Just so you know. He won't. Or he'll come and find you on the path. And his face might not look recognisable. But there's something going on inside you. You're like, what's that? I'll tell you what that is. That's him. But he's not going to force his way. Oh yeah, I'll come in for tea. I'm gasping. No. It's like, oh, I'm off. See you, boys. No, come in. Why? He's waiting for the invite. He's waiting for your invite. He won't force himself into your life. He's waiting for you to invite him. Again, Henri Nouwen puts the invitation like this. Without an invitation, he'll go on to other places. Unless we invite him, he'll always remain a stranger. Possibly a very attractive, intelligent stranger with whom we've had interesting conversations, but a stranger. Even after he has taken much of our sadness away and shown us that our lives are not as petty and as small as we'd assumed, he can still remain the one we met on the road, the remarkable person who crossed our path and spoke with us for a while, the unusual personality about whom we can speak to our family and friends. There's been a few times in my life where I've met people. It's amazing, just some amazing people. I think I told you about the 100-year-old man that was the oldest surviving member of Pearl Harbor. Remember that? It was an amazing conversation. But I never saw him again. Now, did he teach me something? Yes. But did I invite him into my life? No, never saw him again. Where did he go? I don't know. We all have these kind of conversations and moments on our path of life. And our hearts burn. But the question is, are we going to invite that person into our life? Am I going to invite that person into my home? Metaphorically and literally, maybe. For them to know me. For them to know everything about me. For them to see me as I really am. And Jesus comes along on our path of life today. And he'll have a chat. But he won't force himself. we have to invite him in. Let's pray together. Perhaps for some today, you've heard the words of Jesus on many occasions in your life. You've heard from companions on the path about his words in your life. But perhaps at the end of this morning, as we pull in for some refreshment, I want to ask, will you invite him in? And so I'm going to pray a prayer. I'm going to pray it slowly. And if that's you today and you want to invite him in, just pray these words with me. Jesus, I trust you. I entrust myself with all my being, my body, my mind, and my soul to you. I don't want to keep any secrets from you. You can see everything I do and hear everything I say. I don't want you to be a stranger any longer. I want you to become my most intimate friend. I want you to know me. Not only as I walk on the road and talk to my fellow travellers, but also as I find myself alone with my innermost feelings and thoughts. And most of all, I want to come to know you. Not just as my companion on the journey, but as my Saviour and companion of my soul. Amen. If anyone here prayed that prayer this morning, perhaps even for the first time, please let one of us know, or let someone that brought you know. Just make that known to someone around you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Great message this morning. And we always hit a crossroads, don't we, in our lives? And the decisions that we make are paramount to the next chapter in our lives. And I'd rather walk on the path with Jesus than walk a path that leads to lots of heartache. Great message this morning. Next week we have two dedications next week. So I will be preaching, and then Andrew will be back with us the week after that. We meet at 9:30 for prayer a week today, and we're just going to be praying and pressing into God. Continue to do that. So if you can be with us, please come and join us. Those who are online, Thank you for joining us, and God bless you, and have a great week. Thank you, David.